All right, Michael wants to know, what is the daily grind of production, the good and the bad? And can you explain how it may or may not be a good choice for hobbyists or people who do it for fun to pursue it professionally? And that is a really good question, because working on music production as a professional who's getting paid to do it and doing it as a hobby are two very different things. And it's really hard to know when to make the jump from hobby to career. So I'll say this much. When you're doing it for a hobby, it is probably the most joy and the most fun that you can have in production, because you're working on songs that you care about, and you're working on songs you either wrote or you're friends with the people who wrote it, you're in the same band, whatever it is, and you're working with people that you select because you like each other. You want to work together. You at least tolerate each other, right? When you're doing it as a professional, you don't get to pick what song you're working on today. You don't get to pick who you're working on it with. There are people that you're going to work with in sessions and you're going to leave and go, I hope I never see them again. And then tomorrow you're in the same studio and you have to suck it up and do the work, because you got to take the work to pay the bills, right? The song might stink. The prompt might be stupid, but unless you're in a position to turn down work all the time, it's a job and it's work that you're going to be doing, taking on gigs, people that you don't always love. You don't get to pick your coworkers at your job. You don't get to pick your hours all the time. So that joy, that happiness that the hobby brings, it kind of dissipates, because again, you're not in charge of when you work. You don't get to say, I'm not really feeling this one today, so let me come back to it tomorrow after a good night's sleep. When you're at your day job and you're daydreaming about working on music, recording, producing, you're not daydreaming about wrapping cables for an hour. You're not daydreaming about invoicing people. You're not daydreaming about doing revisions for an entire day. I can't tell you how many days I've had to just do revisions all day long because 5 clients decided at the same time to send me their mix notes. That day is not fun. Now, is it amazing to work on music every day? Is it the best job that I could ever imagine having? Yes, but the word job is still in there. It's a dream job, but I don't think most people dream of the job parts of it. They dream of the working on the music, and that, at the end of the day, is up and down. It's a roller coaster. There's going to be days where you literally are mad because you're like, I got to go play guitar. I got to record bass. I got to mic up these drums. Like, do I really have to do it again? And when it's a hobby, you don't have those moments because you're self-selecting everything. So that's the main difference. I don't think that it's a bad thing to go from hobby to a job, but if you love your job and you're making a lot of money and you love producing, that's kind of the dream setup for a lot of people, because like I said, invoicing, editing, revisions, working with people you don't love, that stuff is not fun. And it can be great as a hobby and it can be great as a job, but it's going to vary person to person. So take that as you will. If that scares you away from being a music producer, don't let it. Producing's awesome. It's a great job, but just keep in mind the new job smell, it wears off eventually. Broken Bones Dubstep wants to know the difference between making music to play live versus to play on Spotify. And that's an interesting question. So I've mostly been a studio guy my whole life, but I do play gigs occasionally. In the studio, I don't really like thinking about the show. And what I don't mean is like, oh, this is going to be awesome to play this live. Like, that's cool. But if I suggest to an artist, hey, this would be really cool if we maybe added a layer here, or what about if the drums did this and the bass and the guitar did this? If someone says, well, how are we going to do that live? To me, that's like, okay, that's the problem for you to solve when you go home, when we're done making the song as good as we can. Because I don't want to think about, can we play this live? Should we be recording this if we can't pull it off live? To me, that's always been kind of a pet peeve when people say that to me, because I want to make the best product as far as producing. That's, producing, you're producing a product. I want to make that as good and as cool and as interesting to listen to as I can. Now, there are some acts where the concert is the product and you're recording the music so that they can go do that. Like if you think about like a blues band or, classic rock type stuff where it's like, oh, well, this isn't what our band sounds like because the studio magic stuff isn't really the style. That's one thing. I respect that. If you want to make something raw and real and it sounds like a band playing live, that's great. But if you want to make music for the purpose of impacting people and creating something awesome, I say don't worry about the show. Don't worry about live. Just focus on making the best art that you can make. And then when it's time for rehearsal, if you're like, man, we really painted ourselves in a corner with that one, we're going to have to really push ourselves to make that sound good live. Well, hey, maybe your live show will be better for it. Maybe you'll come up with a cool way to play. Maybe you do some backing tracks. I don't know. I'm not worried about that in the studio. And if you are, that's fine. But for me, just focus on what's going on Spotify. Focus on making the art that you want to make. Worry about the live show later. All right, the next question, I'm going to protect the asker. This one's going to be anonymous. It says, I've got a question you could use for a video. I don't fully understand sample rates for projects, and at this point I'm scared to ask. All right, so that's a great question, and it's actually not that complicated to understand. Hopefully I can make it make sense. All right, so if I am playing audio into the air, right? There's no pixels, there's no resolution, it just exists, right? But when you want to go from audio to digital, you can't capture a full stream of every single microsecond of audio because that would be absolutely massive, right? You're capturing every moment of audio that's going into this digital converter to put it on the computer. So what a sample rate is basically how many snapshots of the time of the audio are we taking per second. So there are samples, which is just going to show you this is a sample of what the audio sounded like in this moment in time. Well, how many snapshots are we taking in 1 second? So 44.1 is going to be 44,100 samples. So if you play a 1 second sound, it's going to snapshot 44,000 little snapshots of this sound. So when you zoom in on a waveform on the computer, for example, well, that looks continuous no matter how far you zoom in, but really it is 44,000 little moments in time captured in that 1 second. So if you go up to like 96K, right? Well, that 1 second of audio is now going to be 96,000 snapshots. So it's, pretty much twice as big. So you're going to be dealing with double the resolution. So that means, well, if you are going to play it back, you've got more information to work with. So if you wanted to like time stretch this and slow it down, well, you've got more resolution to deal with when you're doing that. So if you're recording in 44.1, that is the lowest kind of that we work with, but it's still enough snapshots that human hearing isn't going to hear it as like a chopped up file. It sounds like continuous audio, right? But it doesn't have a ton of resolution to slow things down, to manipulate it. If you're doing a lot of detailed work, you might want a bigger sample rate so that you have more of this like high fidelity audio. Now, the trick is they do sound different in a way. Something about 44.1 kind of sounds, I don't want to say analog because it's not that it sounds analog, but it sounds the way that it sounds. We're used to it, right? Then you go to 96, it's like almost sometimes a little too HD. Like you ever see yourself in one of those mirrors where you're like zoomed in really close and you're like, whoa, I look like that? Sometimes if you're working in the really higher sample rates, you can get that kind of too HD feeling. But again, you can just experiment with these things, like go with your gut. 44.1, there's nothing wrong with it. It's HD enough that you can make great music recorded at that sample rate. There's times where when you're working on projects for other people, they're going to request, hey, can you do it in this sample rate? Can you not? Now, the benefit of 44.1 is it's smaller files. It's half as many snapshots. So you're going to fill up a computer way faster at 96. So if you're even concerned about space at all, go with the smaller one. If you want the ultimate flexibility, you can go bigger. But at the end of the day, they're all going to sound good. They're all going to sound viable for recording commercial music. I've done tons and tons of projects at 44.1 and gotten paid and the check cleared and no one said, wait, you didn't record this at 96. So don't stress about it, but that's what it is. All right, so if you have any questions you want to ask me, I am mostly pulling these from people who email me. So I've got this mailing list going and we're having a good time. You can sign up at the link down below. I will email you back. We can email back and forth. If you join this mailing list right now, I'm going to send you the template that I've been using for my to-do lists and my planner. So I've been working on this planner. It's a physical book that I'm going to sell, but I'm just emailing everyone PDFs of it right now because I want you to be able to use it. So if you want to get a question in these videos, you want to get that template, or you just want to say what up and say hi, the link is going to be down in the comments. Other than that, I'll see you next week, hopefully with some more questions, and we'll keep having a good time. Oh, and watch this video next. All right, bye.